Former Leicester midfielder and current free agent Youri Tielemans has been heavily linked with a move to Aston Villa. To find out more today, I'm joined by Dougie Critchley, who's a broadcaster with Football Daily and Sky Sports. Dougie, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, mate. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. We were just saying before we started recording that it's quite an exciting time for Villa fans. Got European football back, got a top manager in, and some really exciting targets who are being linked with as well.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming for Villa. It's been a long time since we've been linked to such exciting targets, and one of them is the Belgian international himself, Youri Tielemans. So I guess the first question is, what sort of a player is Tielemans?
Well, I think he's been at the top level for a long, long time now, and he's kind of proved himself most effectively, whilst he does have defensive qualities, as a excellent passer through the lines. I think that's his strongest suit. He does have great passing range. He's very composed on the ball. He can take the ball in tight spaces, turn pretty effectively. He's not necessarily the quickest, or you might find better dribblers through tight spaces, but he's got excellent long range passing and long range shooting as well. And I think that's what Villa are looking for, because I was looking at some of the stats earlier. And in terms of your passes into the final third, in terms of your progressive passes, Villa were mid to low table. I mean, you're 15th for passes into the final third, which was level with Everton and only narrowly ahead of Southampton, two teams that struggled, and Southampton eventually went down. You also rank 15th for progressive passes. So I think Unai Emery might have realised that maybe you're running on a slight hot streak towards the back end of the year with that amazing run from Ollie Watkins. And to consistently get the ball into that final third might be something that he needs to improve. And Tielemans on a free feels like a very good way of doing that.
Yeah, I mean he's a versatile player. Started as I think a CDM early in his career, or played in that position. So, is he somebody that you think, let's say Boubacar Kamara as a CDM got injured, or Douglas Luiz got injured, who plays a little bit further forward? Is Tielemans one of them players that could function in a variety of roles in the Villa midfield?
Yeah, I think he'll predominantly be used further forward as well. Definitely not the ultimate sitter. I think during his time at Leicester, his best performances came in front of Wilfred Ndidi and a fully fit and on form Wilfred Ndidi, which we just didn't see last season at all. I think it was by far the most disappointing season of Ndidi's career, and Tielemans' form seemed to slightly suffer from that. Brendan Rodgers said I think it was in about February 2022, there needs to be a big clear out at Leicester. Some of the players aren't as good as they think they are, and others just aren't good enough at all. And Leicester was ultimately left with a squad with a lot of players that are out of contract, a number of ones that wanted to leave. And Tielemans basically felt like he fitted best into that second bracket, a player that wanted to leave. And you can understand why, because although he'd won an FA Cup with Leicester, back-to-back fifth place finishes and eighth place before last season, when they, of course, went down, he was being linked to the likes of Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal in the preceding 2-3 years. So it's not surprising that his form was slightly affected. But I kind of would slightly be concerned about him playing as a defensive midfielder. I do think, in front of someone more defensively minded, that's when his range of passing can come into play. And whilst he does have some defensive output, it's definitely not the strongest part of his game.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned all them clubs there. There's Man United's and Arsenal's. I think he's been linked with in the past. Given that he is a free agent now, are you surprised that he's not been linked with a few more clubs as well? I mean, I know it's Roma have been mentioned, but it seems like Villa are the main club that seems to be linked with him at the moment.
Yeah, I'm incredibly surprised, to be honest, because this was the player that we were talking about for a sort of £50 million move a couple of summers ago. And now the fact that he's on a free, he's Premier League proven, and on his best, in his best form, the season prior to last and the season before that, was probably a top 10 to 15 central midfielder in the league. And maybe that's being a little bit harsh. I do think his top level was really exceptional. And he's got a whole, wealth of experience. He's got over 50 caps for Belgium. He's got over 500 career appearances. And so this is a guy who's been in a number of different match situations. And for Villa, who will, hopefully go deep into the Conference League for you guys next year, potentially play up to 15 more games, having more depth will be a massive, massive weapon for you guys, basically. And it does need to improve, because Leandro Dendoncker had to play quite a few games for you last year. I mean, Phil Coutinho, not playing in the same position, but had to play quite a few games for you last year as well. So it just feels like you're taking your central midfield depth up to a new level. And on a free transfer as well, it feels very very risk averse, really. I mean, he's got a pretty solid injury record. I think he's only missed about 15 games in the last 4 seasons in the league, that is.
Wow.
And yeah, on a free transfer for, I can't imagine super money, because Leicester have obviously gone down and he's probably not in the best bargaining position now. But it feels like this is kind of risk free for Aston Villa. Sorry.
Yeah, and how would you say he's performed in the Premier League? He's been here a few years now, and he obviously had that incredible moment in the FA Cup final, great goal to win it. But I've always really rated him. I've always thought he's a good player whenever I've seen him. But how would you sort of assess that he's performed in the Premier League?
Yeah, I think very well. I mean, this was a player that at Anderlecht, when he first broke through at about 16 or 17, he was playing senior football, was talked about as the next big thing, not just in Belgium, but in European football. Went to Monaco, had a difficult spell there, then joined Leicester halfway through. I think it was the 2018-19 season in that January, initially on loan, and established himself over the next couple of years alongside Maddison and Barnes as these really, really exciting up-and-coming talents. And I think performed excellently for a long time. Now, you know, as I mentioned earlier, he was linked with a number of moves away. I think that did affect his performance, to be honest, last year. I thought his effort was sometimes maybe questioned. And look, it's difficult when you're playing in a side that is clearly going through a lot of issues off the pitch. Your manager's under huge pressure. Your manager then gets fired. You've got some of your captains or your leaders in that dressing room. The likes of Johnny Evans were injured throughout last year or for much of last year. Jamie Vardy was off the boil. And it did seem to affect his performances slightly, at least in a defensive sense. Like his tackles per 90 dropped slightly. His interceptions actually stayed in a similar sort of level, but his tackle success rate dropped from 42% to 37%. Now that's a little bit troubling in a Villa midfield where he might be asked to do a fair amount of defensive work. And if he's going to play in those bigger games against the top six or the established top six sides, he'll certainly be asked to. But what I was pleased to see last year was that his passing numbers, which I think is what has always stood out for him, is remained really solid. I mean, they were at 5.9 the year before, passes into the final third, that is, and that jumped to 6.5 last year. Progressive passes around the similar sort of jump as well. So what he's very good at remained good last year. I just slightly was concerned that, you know, the lack of interest this summer might reflect on the fact that he's played a lot of football for his age and was playing in a very poor Leicester team last year. Because to be honest, at his best, I think he's a bit of a steal for any top half Premier League club.
Yeah, you know, you think of all the players that have improved under Unai Emery as well since he joined in October. You know, this will run through so many names: McGinn, Watkins, Mings, like so many others. Do you think that Emery would, in a way, be almost the perfect manager for Tielemans now after a disappointing season to maybe refine his form and even reach another level that he perhaps hasn't even got to in his career?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Emery's got a great record with central midfielders during his time at Sevilla and particularly at Villarreal. I remember that side with Francis Coquelin and Dani Parejo. They look like two of the best, you know, midfielders in La Liga under his stewardship as well. So he's very, very used to setting up a side that works incredibly well as a unit. People always talk about Emery as a really defensive manager. I don't think that's always the case, to be honest. They press very effectively as a unit. They always seem very connected. And it just seems like whenever you watch an Unai Emery team, you can see the idea that he's trying to get across, which you don't always find at Premier League level or around Europe, that is. So I think Tielemans has got a very good chance of succeeding and instantly hitting the ground running in a league that he knows so well if he was to join Aston Villa. And I think the likes of Emi Buendia, if he's still playing in that number 10 role occasionally, or Ollie Watkins running onto his dynamic through balls as well. I think they'll really profit from playing alongside a player with his passing range and quality.
Yeah, I mean, so to sum it up really then, I mean, how effective a player do you think he would be for Aston Villa were he to join, or rather, how effective could he be for Aston Villa were he to join us in the next few weeks?
I think very effective, to be honest, as long as he gets back and to his best and is fully motivated, which I think Emery's a master of doing. I'm not sure whether he instantly walks into your first 11 at the moment, or at least on the basis of his form last year, because I did think Douglas Luiz was exceptional. Yeah. Boubacar Kamara as well is a really high quality individual. And we saw that in fits and bursts last year when he was fully fit. And I don't think he should play in that sort of 10 role where Emi Buendia has played. And it feels like you're going to make a few more additions this summer as well, given the links with the likes of Dani Ceballos. You probably wouldn't sign Tielemans and Dani Ceballos, but Arnaut Danjuma looks like he's coming in. Like, it feels like Villa are going to be busy. throughout this summer, which is really exciting for you guys. And it's probably needed as well because, yes, you performed exceptionally well under Unai Emery last year, but a lot of your signings over the last few seasons haven't really come off in the way, you know, Steven Gerrard expected, or before that, Dean Smith expected as well. So it feels like quite a thin squad. And we've seen with West Ham this year going deep in the Conference League, they only got 40 points in the Premier League. So it can really detract from your league performance. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Villa necessarily, but you do need numbers for the slog of Thursday, Sunday. It is pretty relentless, particularly in that middle part of the season when the FA Cup kicks off, and if you go deep in the Carabao Cup as well. So I think he's a really good addition. He can start in a number of positions, but I expect he'll play a little bit further forward of Camara or Douglas Luiz, or particularly Camara, really, because Douglas Luiz was so effective in that box-to-box role. And I think he'll make a massive difference to Villa. So on a free transfer, I'm a massive fan of this move.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned those passes into the final third. Do you think that would be the real unique attribute he might add to the club?
Yeah, that and his long range shooting as well. Like, I don't think Douglas Luiz, you know, bagged a few towards the end of last year, but John McGinn's never been a massive goal output guy. And it felt like with Leon Bailey still not really, you know, hitting his straps last year, it felt like, you know, Jacob Ramsey was really your second most sort of dangerous player after Ollie Watkins. So if he can add a few more goals to his game, get back to his Leicester best that included that amazing FA Cup final goal in 2021, and the season prior to that as well, he was magnificent as well. And I'm surprised that the rest of the top six have been sleeping on this, unless they know something that I don't about his. I mean, he's captained his club, so he's clearly a good personality. He's captained his country, I believe, and seems like a reasonable, you know, good, solid person as well. So I can't really see why any other top six or top eight club hasn't gone for him. So for now, I just try and keep this under wraps as much as possible and get it over the line.
Yeah, well, Dougie, thank you very much. That's been really, really revelatory and really helped me sort of set my ideas about Tielemans, and particularly that long-range shooting as well. How I think sometimes in some games, Villa have been, you know, against Wolves, for instance, we lost 1-0, and there were a couple of occasions where we thought, can someone just take a shot from 25 yards out? And it didn't look like we really had a player to do it, whereas Tielemans obviously can offer that. But Dougie, can we just, for those who might not know, where can we find you and your work online?
Yeah, sure. So I'm at Dougie Critchley on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, if you so desire, if that's your thing. But yeah, mainly on Football Daily, across our YouTube, Twitter, Instagram content, and also occasionally on Sky Sports News, particularly covering their European football. So yeah, any of those places.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Great to meet you.
Thank you.